This conversation about Kohanim, about the ancient structure of Jewish people and the caste of priests reminded me in general theme of the book of Leviticus, really, which is all about worship, all about the service and priests and sacrifices, temple, reminded me of a relatively modern joke about Kohanim. So a person comes to first an Orthodox rabbi and says, well, can I please become Kohen? And for those of you who know that Kohen can only be transmitted from father to the son, and this is, especially in Orthodox circles, this is a huge honor to be a Kohen. I mean, you don't need to do much, you just need to be born Kohen, but still. So it's a huge honor. And the person comes and says, any price, I will make a donation to the synagogue, just make me Kohen, please. And of course, Orthodox rabbi said, no, please go away. I mean, no, it's impossible. Then the same person comes to a conservative or Masorti rabbi, says the same, can you make me Kohen, any money, just make a donation, please do. And the same answer. Then it comes to a progressive rabbi without specifying. And the rabbi, instead of saying no, is asking, well, just out of interest, I mean, we really don't believe in the castes in Judaism anymore, but still, what is it? Why is it that you want to be a Kohen? What do you mean, why? My grandfather was a Kohen. My father was a Kohen. I want to be a Kohen too. Okay. And this structure of Kohanim, it seems so irrelevant. All you need to do is to be born. And the Torah, on the other hand, we often speak about Torah as something compared to the source of water, the sustaining life, never running dry, a well and source from which we can draw inspiration. And the water is also a good analogy because you can't survive without water for more than a few days. And that's why it's compared to water and not food. But when we approach the middle of the Torah, the book of Leviticus, the text goes so dry and lists such unpleasant details that it becomes almost irrelevant. It drives people away from Judaism. And as Claudia Setzer, a professor of religious studies in Manhattan College, put it, we relate to the colorful narratives of Genesis and respond to the powerful story of liberation in Exodus. The prophets call us to social justice. The language and imagery of these works have infused and sustained some of the great movements in Judaism and in the world. Yet the priestly material in the books of Leviticus and Numbers leaves many of us thirsty. How can you draw meaning from unpleasant disease and the strange process of purification the Torah prescribes? It often reminds us of a magic ritual rather than a medical procedure. How can a time outside of the camp be meaningful to a person with a skin condition, tzara'at? How can a sacrifice in the temple be helpful to overcome the disease, isolation, and rejection from your community? And the last question I have, why do we still read this? And I'm not the only one asking such questions. Because of these questions, many people struggle to connect with Judaism, and especially the book of Leviticus. Rabbi Nancy Weiner and Rabbi Joe Hirschman wrote a book entitled Maps and Meaning, Levitical Models for Contemporary Care. If you struggle with this text, as I did, I highly, highly recommend this book. It's rooted in the author's experience as rabbis and chaplains, and relevant. And this book is relevant to those looking for fresh perspective on the biblical narratives about priests and temple rituals. The book compares the Levitical priest to a modern clergy, or even to modern soldiers, firefighters, therapists, doctors. So all those professions Work, or all those professions have work that requires them to spend time in very unusual places, in circumstances that most people would not call normal. Rabbis Weiner and Hirschman compare such spaces with the Torah notion outside of the camp. And as a rabbi, I can relate to it. I can spend a morning in a cemetery, an afternoon in a hospital, and be at a ballroom conducting a wedding in the same evening. Soldiers sometimes spend their time on battlefields, firefighters in places of destruction. The book goes further and suggests that, paradoxically, such places or experience of being in such places, both for the people who work there and for people who ended up being there, being the victims, these things can help us to feel, or might allow us to grow and change. Today we have similar experiences. Modern hospitals, nursing homes, and military bases are just a few of the contemporary examples of biblical concept, michutz lamachaneh, outside of the camp, outside, unusual, extraordinary places, as they put it. Experience of being in hospital for a long time changes your life. It puts things into perspective. And apart from physical changes to your body, if sometimes happen, this experience can make you rethink your priorities. And in biblical times, the person afflicted by or affected by tzaraat had to go outside the camp, spend some time there, at least 7 days, or often it was much more, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, months, 2 months, until they're healed, and return home again. Instead of just focusing on the person affected by the condition, we need to focus on the role of Kohen in this story, the priest. Following the book's logic, most of us at some point spend a long time in unusual places that you did not choose to be. It can be a hospital, it can be army base, or even a hotel room on a business trip that you didn't choose, or you didn't like, didn't enjoy. Returning home after such a trip can require a long adjustment. It can be very simple as the fact that you need to cook your own breakfast again, but in some cases, it's much more extreme. It can take years and years to reintegrate into the society. And often, we marginalize those who spend time in such places. We don't want to speak about them. We don't want to look at them. And looking at the priest and those with tzaraat in the Torah and their ritual of coming home, we learn about the crucial role of what they call border crossers. Those who live inside the society in the normal world, so-called normal world, but who are also allowed to enter spaces of quarantine, who enter spaces of war zones and institutions which doors are closed for most of us. We often marginalize and stigmatize people in prisons, refugee centers, and in some hospitals. What if these chapters are not about the disease, not about how to heal the body or house, but about showing that these people are normal? They also have feelings. They worship God in the same way as you. They also need spiritual life guidance and deserve our respect and dignity. It just happened that they were affected by a skin condition or their house was affected by something, but they are like all of us. They cannot come back to normal life in one day. They need time and they need to go through the process of readjustment. Border crossers play a crucial role in this process. If we believe historians and Jewish scholars, the Torah was not given on Mount Sinai. I don't want to shock, but it's probably true. It is a compilation of many ancient myths, laws, legends, poems, texts of wisdom that existed in the ancient Middle East. At some point in history, people took them and edited in a single narrative. They made it flow, and in time, the book became a bestseller, so popular that nobody remembered its origin, and it was declared sacred, holy, or in other words, special. According to historians, Torah was edited and compiled in about the 6th century before the Common Era, but contained texts from the past. In the time when most Jewish people were exiled to Babylon, Jewish people suddenly had to spend many years, many decades outside the camp, without a temple, without the centralized place, in an unfamiliar environment. They didn't choose it, but the circumstances forced them to be there. And after about 50 years of exile, after the Babylonian Empire was replaced by Persian Empire, Jews were allowed to come back. If we read this week's Torah portion through the lens of history, it might shed a light on what it tries to tell us. People who spend a long time in different places, in marginalized places, in stigmatized places, are normal people. They are affected by it, of course. They are changed by it, but they remain human and have normal needs, like all of us. Most people expect them to be normal immediately. For example, requiring those who are refugees to immediately start work after they're back or after they resettled. But it takes time to readjust to the new old world. These people rely on us to be border crossers. Those of us who are brave enough to see beyond titles and stigmas and we need to do very simple thing. See people behind nicknames and human stories behind political slogans. And we often are scared of saying that some people are not well enough. We're often scared to say, to show our weaknesses as a society. But this week's Torah portion goes straight into the weakest point in the society, straight into the house of people that are affected by the terrible disease, and supports them instead of just ignoring them. The book of Leviticus, with its dry portions about skin disease and stones most likely affected by mold, is not about the people affected by it, but it is about us. This book is asking us to become border crossers. This book is asking us to become Kohanim, because we are, the entire nation is the nation of priests and holy nation. We need to become border crossers and to be brave enough to enter unusual places and to see that these people are normal people like you and me. We are strong when we look after the weak. We are rich when we support the poor. We become robust when we treat the most fragile with respect and dignity. במקום שאין אנשים, השתדל להיות איש. In a place where there are no people, we need to try to remain a human being. Shabbat Shalom.